We can now go on to our first talk, close to my own heart, really. I'm pleased to introduce Professor John Dillon from Ninewells Hospital in Dundee. John, like me, is a liver specialist, and we've worked together in a number of areas over many years. John has a very varied and star-studded reputation, really, in various liver fields. His work in hepatitis C, eradicating it, or trying to eradicate it in Tateside, very successful, and also very good work on early detection of liver disease using automated screening of blood tests is very innovative. But John's also been a great supporter of alcohol prevention work and has been on the steering group of SHAAP for a number of years. And he's going to talk about some of the work which he and Peter Rice were instrumental with, along with Eric, on alcohol-related liver disease. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Alistair. It's a pleasure to be here to speak kindly of Eric and all our dealings with him. I'm reminded of my first meeting properly with Eric and Peter. It was up here in Ninewells. Suddenly in front of me was a nice cup of coffee, a nice chocolate cake, and I had a strong feeling that my arm was about to be firmly twisted up behind my back. And true enough, it was. Eric had conceived and persuaded Scottish Government that we should be thinking about standards around what we do for liver disease in patients who use excess alcohol. And the review of the alcohol policy was going on at the time, and Eric was trying to engineer, or in fact was encouraged by the civil servants that there would be some guidance around liver disease within that document. And as you're all aware, liver disease, while it only affects 20% of people who drink alcohol to excess, it causes a disproportionate amount of the morbidity and mortality related with liver disease. And for all the people that are identified as using excess alcohol, we have very disparate guidelines about what to do, and it depends rather randomly as to which door you happen to enter into this process, as to whether you get assessed for liver disease or not, or whether you get completely ignored. And that's clearly a missed opportunity, particularly as we come to this age of personalized medicine where we can individualize risk and potentially change people's behavior once they know their individual risk, rather than the more generic advice that we're more used to giving out. And so there was a big opportunity here to improve the quality of care and move things forward. So Eric engineered a large group of people, facilitated the meetings, brought all the stakeholders together with a sort of effortless ease that I'm sure was what appeared on the surface of the water, but I'm sure he was working furiously underneath to make it all happen, and brought disparate partners that would normally be in the same room together into the same place, and created the guidelines. And I'm not allowed a slide, but I am allowed to show you what the guidelines look like. Eric's particular contribution was to pick the front cover and design the front cover, that jigsaw piece of putting the whole liver back together again, which is what the aim was. And these guidelines have been very useful in terms of setting out what the standard should be of collating evidence together. So for non-experts who are working in fields focused around the alcohol excess or alcohol addiction, without necessarily having as much knowledge as Alistair and I do about the liver itself, they knew what they should be doing to be safe. And that was a huge short-term contribution. Here was a concise document that brought the known information together. And I think it sets that standard going forward, that hopefully, as we move towards early detection of liver disease, increasing awareness of the need to look at people as a whole and all of the damage that can be done, these guidelines will still be useful going forward to achieve that. So on behalf of the hepatological community, all the people that are going to be helped by these guidelines, Eric, I'd like to say thank you. And with that, I'll shut up. Over to you, Alistair.
Thank you very much, John. Indeed, it was a great piece of work, and is still being used, and still more to be done in terms of getting it more widely used, I have to say. We're not planning on taking too many questions as we're going along, but if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll have time to chat about them together after the first 4 talks. So please feel free to use the chat box, and we'll take your questions then. But if you do have anything urgent, stick up your hand, and if you can, use the online hand rather than your own hand, because clearly with this number of attendees, I can't see you all at one time. Moving on to the next talk, I'm delighted that Jardine Simpson is here. Jardine, as many of you know, is the Chief Executive Officer of Scottish Recovery Consortium, SRC, who are committed to making recovery more accessible to those experiencing addiction issues in Scotland. From my earliest days on the steering group of SHAAP, it became clear that Eric was passionate about letting people with lived experience and their families or whatever connection they have get their voice. And so I'm delighted that Jardine is going to be able to talk to us a little bit about the work that he and Eric have done together. Over to you, Jardine.
Thank you, Alistair. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Huge big thanks to Eric. And I also noticed that Felicity is joining us, and it's great to see you too, Felicity. I want to start off by talking about when I first encountered Eric back in 2016, when the great and the good were assembled in Edinburgh to discuss what would be next after the road to recovery. I think at that time we were discussing a potential national policy of keep, seek and treat. I remember hearing for the first time a rather well turned out chap in a three-piece suit, but rather angry, expressing his dismay at the lack of any joined up approach within the next big thing in drugs policy, having any linkage to the alcohol policy work that was ongoing, and SHAAP still plays such a seminal role in. That was Eric, and he spoke towards the end of the day so eloquently and so passionately, and that was my first meeting. And I was struck by how important it was for me as a human being to connect with Eric. That didn't happen on a regular basis until I became the Chief Executive of Scottish Recovery Consortium in 2018. And already by then, I realised that SHAAP were going to be so important for the agenda that as a new Chief Executive, I really wanted to roll out across Scottish Recovery Consortium and amongst people with lived experience of alcohol and drug addiction and recovery in Scotland. And Eric proved to be, and still is, one of my dearest friends in the drug and alcohol sector, and one of the few people that I really regard as maybe not a mentor, because I don't think he would like that term. It would make him rather uncomfortable. But he's certainly somebody whose approach I strive to emulate as a professional working in this sector. Because Eric, as a professional, never, ever lets that role eclipse his humanity, you know. And for me, that really enhances his practice in everything he does, and certainly in the work that he did with SHAAP. And I want to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But right from the very outset, that first initial meeting in Edinburgh, when I heard Eric speaking, I realised that here was somebody who, as a professional, understood the relevance of lived experience of alcohol dependency and recovery from that position. He understood, not as a supportive researcher, but he understood as a human being the power of that process of transcendent change that people in recovery go through. He understood it humanly and intrinsically. And probably more important for the sector, he was able to articulate it to his colleagues and to people with lived experience in a genuine, authentic and beneficial way. And really for me, that is the the lasting impression of SHAAP as an organisation. And I'd like to thank you, Eric, for keeping that course alive. For me, the importance of lived experience not being regarded as a cohort of individuals who can be utilised as service user involvement or researched at, and then data collected is hoovered back into an academic and professional and clinical system. And that system then interprets and articulates findings in a way that people with lived and living experience find very, very difficult to navigate. Eric was wholly committed to making the process of giving data an empowering one, a beneficial one to the people that he was asking to contribute to his research. And for me, that approach is encapsulated, and I'll follow Peter's lead here, is encapsulated by this document: stand up and tell me your story. For me, this is a seminal piece of work because my agenda as a person with lived experience and the purpose of Scottish Recovery Consortium to support, represent and connect is founded on facilitating a shift in how Scotland generates, analyses and utilises evidence, you know. As a population of around 5.5 million, we're small enough to make radical change happen in a global sense very quickly. And we're also big enough to be of global importance in terms of research. So for me to synthesize the idea of lived experience being regarded as another echelon of expertise and also having an equitable contribution to how we can redress or readdress the relationship between research and lived experience was so important and remains so important today. Eric, I believe, is a true supporter of lived experience because he understands what lived experience has to bring to the systematic approach to the reduction of harms around substances in Scotland. And he walks the walk alongside many others who talk the talk, you know. Eric's contribution in Stand Up and Tell Me Your Story. If you haven't read that document, please give it a read. And it does not matter. It does not matter why you're attending this seminar today. If you're a person with lived experience, if you're a family member, if you're a clinical professional, a third sector manager, a frontline worker, read that document. Because for the first time in my life or in my career over the last 15 years working all across Scotland, I found a piece of research that was addressed at all of us, not a small segment of the systematic approach, but all of us, you know. And Stand Up and Tell Me Your Story starts off very traditionally, very qualitative, very academically orientated in its language and its presentation. But organically, it evolves as a document into the qualitative experiences and inputs of people who have experienced the system, experienced how our society responds to some of its most vulnerable, but potentially most asset-based citizens, you know. And if you take the time to read through that document, and I encourage you to, because it's very, very readable, it's not a chore. Throughout that experience of reading that document, you gain an understanding and an insight, not only into how research can benefit from working with lived experience in a different way, but you also become exposed and part of a movement a movement of connectivity, a movement of values, not a movement of shifting resource from one place to another. Because it's what we are dealing with here is people with lived experience, and as clinical professionals and as researchers. Ultimately, we are dealing with human beings, and systematic approaches work well in terms of managing resource and coordinating capacity. But a systematic approach that governs individual practice stymies that transcendent process of change. And Eric Carlin understands that. And Eric Carlin has articulated that in documents like Stand Up and Tell Me Your Story. It's a seminal piece of work, you know. And isn't it interesting that here we are today, and some of you may have followed the news, and I know that Alistair appeared on Radio Scotland earlier talking about minimum unit pricing. Look at the work that SHAAP under Eric's leadership did around minimum unit pricing. And more than that, going beyond the systematic approach, actually engaging with Scotland's whole population, whether it be through Scottish women's football team, whether it be through his own personality as a human being, engaging the population in why it's important to understand the harms caused by the substance of alcohol to the human body and the human psyche.
Thanks very much, Jordan. That's a fantastic, very heartfelt a statement, really, and I'm very glad you highlighted Stand Up and Tell Your Story. It is indeed a great piece of work. It's great to see so many faces here, familiar faces and some unfamiliar ones, and so many from different settings and indeed internationally. One of the things that struck me about SHAAP when I first got involved was just how international their outlook is. We were encouraged to tell our sort of stories of meeting Eric, and I don't really have a particular personal story of meeting Eric, but I think that the sort of breadth of the work that SHAAP were doing came home to me when SHAAP and Scotland hosted the European Alcohol Policy Conference in 2018. It really reflected the standing that Scotland has in the international community in the alcohol policy field. I also came across at that meeting for the first time Marianne Scarr, who will be familiar to many of you. Marianne has just finished her stint as the Secretary General of the European Alcohol Policy Alliance, Eurocare. And nobody better qualified than Marianne to speak about the more international aspects of SHAAP and particularly Eric's work. So welcome, Marianne, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to SHAAP for inviting me to speak here. It's been, I can tell you that I met Eric first time in 2010. And while I was tidying up my desk, I've actually found the minutes from the meeting. And we had a great meeting then, but never did I believe that we would have so much be working so much together in the years to come. I could highlight a number of issues, but I have to, of course, minimum unit price was the first one that we really worked hard together with. And the minimum unit price, when I'm looking back at it, is in many ways a really good case study of how you work from a national, from the idea the health professionals start working on, you get it on national level, you work to the EU level and continues. And these discussions have been of immense importance. And I think we should learn a lot about those in the years to come. We made a list over the meetings we had together with Eric and Peter over many years. And the list is so long, I couldn't even show it on the screen. There was a number of informal small meetings and more formal meetings. And we had conferences like Scotland, the Brave, in the council, etc., etc. And the fun part with this is that it's working with Eric here is really, it's fun. So it's not only that we have to do these things and we write and we prepare, but we actually have a very good time together when we're doing it. And I want to highlight that part. You already mentioned the European Alcohol Policy Conference in Scotland, which was a huge success. And a great time. And Eric managed to gather people all over Europe into one room. We had meetings, we had discussions, we had a number of governmental representatives. And actually, this is also one of Eric's big, you mentioned the lived experience. I would like to mention also his ability to put together governmental decision makers, policy makers, etc., and health professionals and the civil society. And this is important when you want to have a political change. So for me, that has been one of the major learning things I've been learning together with Eric. Sitting here, there are so many. I have a list here I didn't bring any reports, but I have my notes here. And there's so much I would like to say about Eric, but I also have to say, we have not only been doing political things like this, we have also been writing applications for EU funding. Yeah. And it's a lot of work. First, we have a lot of work together writing these applications, and then we get the funding and we have to get going again. And Eric, you have been totally instrumental in helping Eurocare and the European Alcohol Policy Association in getting this done. There's one struggle I've had with Eric over all these years, and I don't think I ever succeeded. It's to teach him to leave the desk for lunch and come to sit in the kitchen or in the meet or around the table. I bet you still are sitting at your desk and eating lunch and working, Eric. But I have to say that whatever you say about Eric, it is that he delivers. He delivers, and whatever we have been doing, he does what he says he will do, and it goes well. And we have, as I mentioned, fun. Because this is an official meeting, I cannot really tell you all the stories we have around the table, the situation room, we call it, or around coffee table, discussing different issues. And that's why I really enjoy working and have enjoyed so much working with Eric.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Yes, we should maybe stop you there before you go into too many late night details there. but yes, thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker continues the international flavour. Although interestingly, when I first met him, I don't think Donald will remember this, but a long time ago, long before I ever was involved with SHAAP, I was the kind of token Scottish gastroenterology representative at a meeting of the British Society of Gastroenterology with St Andrew's House staff about what Scotland was doing about alcohol policy. And the two people at that meeting that I met for the first time were Alison Douglas, who at that time was leading up the brief interventions programme, which of course has been such a big success, and Donald, who was at that time getting his teeth into this new idea of minimum unit price policies. And Donald has been a huge worker for good in all aspects of that policy. I'm delighted that Donald's taken the time out of his busy schedule. I should actually have just told you who don't know who he is. Donald is a civil servant, previously head of public health in the Scottish Government, and that was what I was referring to earlier. But he's now moved on and is Deputy Director of Redress in Scotland, which I gather provides survivor relations and abuse inquiry responses, another difficult and responsible role. But Donald, we're delighted you can take time out of his busy schedule to come and talk to us about your work with Eric today.
Thanks very much. So I'll start with a couple of apologies. First of all, I'm not sure how the connection is. And secondly, I'm speaking to you from a very funny angle because Zoom isn't working on my laptop. So I'm on my mobile phone and it looks like I'm on Mount Olympus speaking down at you all. But Eric's role, and indeed the role of SHAAP under Eric's leadership, was, in my view, absolutely fundamental. I came in actually from a job in Brussels, where I'd had the unusual experience of, after the 2011 election, which gave the SNP a majority, and where it was clear that the parliamentary difficulties that had been faced in pushing minimum unit price through in the previous parliament would no longer exist. But the next hurdle down the road was a European hurdle. So I was phoning Harry to tell him that he had a problem, and he was phoning me to to ask me to come back to Edinburgh and lead the work, which was serendipity indeed. And some of the earliest people I met were Eric and Peter Rice in SHAAP, and we became. I can't think in a 40-year civil service career, I can't think of a relationship that we have had between government and non-government which has been so productive and has achieved so much as the relationship with SHAAP. And that in my mind, came into its own when we did indeed face challenges from judicial review that was brought in 2012, but a European process had already started at that point, and it was pretty evident that by one means or another, we were going to reach the Court of Justice in Luxembourg as well. And at that early stage, we were pretty isolated. We did have lockstep support from Ireland, which maintained. And actually behind the scenes, we had some pretty commendable support from the UK government as well, both in the form of Jim Wallace, who was then the UK's Scottish law officer, but also in number 10, David Cameron, Jeremy Haywood were very interested in the policy, and I had long meetings with Jeremy Haywood and with the private secretary who was dealing with that. So they were enormously supportive, but it still felt like a bizarre policy conjured up from the Celtic extremes on the northwest of Europe. And the Commission viewed it really as being not only novel but contentious. So what we needed to do was gain more support, more countries on our side, and explain sufficiently the policy that we had to make sure that some of the critics who were perhaps misplaced in their opposition, even if they didn't come to our side, they stopped being against us. And there was a degree of that work that we were able to do within the civil service and through diplomatic channels. But there was a great deal of it we simply couldn't get to, because as in Scotland, the work to promote and explain minimum unit price had started in the medical profession, and the medical profession in academia and campaigning work. So the work of explaining this policy in France and in Germany and in the Low Countries and in the Baltic countries and in many others as well, we were going to get more purchase on it in persuading health departments, who in turn, this work was often led, and one of the problems lay that the work was often led by finance and trade ministries. It wasn't led by health departments with a view to saving lives and improving the quality of lives. And similarly in Brussels. So we needed to get the entry into these member state administrations, and it was SHAAP and indeed Eurocare under Marianne Scarr's leadership who helped achieve that, going to the equivalent of the medical colleges, the royal colleges in other countries, making sure that the messages were deployed as effectively and as widely as they could be, so that it wasn't just these slightly mad Scots who were running the argument, who were explaining the need and the benefit, but people from within their own country, the doctors and academics from within their own country. And I know that this worked from conversations that I had with ministry officials who made reference to the fact that people we had no contact with had been in to see the health ministry, and often had managed to get in to see the trade and finance ministries as well. And this was solely because of the work that SHAAP, and with Eric's energy, I'm not sure he was ever off the flight from Edinburgh to Brussels, the energy that Eric and his colleagues were able to bring. So that by the last stage of the process, when we were in the European Court of Justice, just before the case was handed back to the Inner House in Scotland, we didn't just have ourselves in Ireland. The UK government was still lockstep with us, even if there were perhaps some sceptics within that administration. But in addition, we had the Netherlands, we had Norway, we had Sweden. But other voices that are powerful voices in the context of the European Union, and had previously opposed the policy and had written to the Commission to say so, France and Germany and others, stayed silent. And that was actually as much help to us as the people who did join our side, so that it no longer looked like a mad idea from the Celtic fringe. It looked like a coming idea from people who had foresight. And Eric was one of the leaders of that foresight. And I think his contribution to health policy and to public policy more generally will stand many a year. So I was delighted to be asked to come here and say something of my experience of Eric's international work, and I applaud that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Donald. And if I could just reciprocate that as somebody who wasn't involved, so I don't need to sort of feel in any way responsible. I think that your role was absolutely instrumental in the success too. I know Peter and Eric greatly value that. So thanks again for coming along. We didn't want you to have too many presentations thrown at you without a little bit of a break, and so there's a chance now to reflect on these talks. And if any of you would like to ask anything about these particular pieces of work, the alcohol-related liver disease guidance, stand up and tell your story, European work such as the European Conference, or indeed minimum unit price policy, how it managed to breach these legal and international hurdles, feel free to ask. While you're thinking about that, I might just take advantage of the slight pause that we've got to allow one or two people who might want to say something who are not formally on the agenda to give a talk. So I wonder if, this is putting you on the spot here slightly, I don't know whether Catherine Severi, would you like to say something, Catherine? I know you were keen to express something from the Institute, the Alcohol Studies, in relation to Eric's period at SHAAP. You there, Catherine? She's maybe not there at the moment. In that case, I've got another opportunity up my sleeve to, I wonder if Alison, oh, somebody's coughing. Nope.
Hi, Alistair.
Hi, Alison. I wonder if, since I took over from Eric as the, took over from Peter as the chair of SHAAP, I've realised just how closely SHAAP and Alcohol Focus Scotland have to work together. And I've got a couple of questions coming in, but having started this, I'll finish it, as Magnus Magnusson said. Alison, would you like to say a couple of words?
Thanks, Alistair. Delighted to contribute. I mean, I think it's absolutely stunning how many people are here today to celebrate Eric's contribution to alcohol policy and practice in Scotland. You know, I mean, that in itself just tells you the impact that he's had. But as so many people are saying as well, it's his sense of humour and his engaging style, I think, that are as memorable as his achievements. So I was busy typing away, but you've given me the opportunity to say it rather than type it. And Eric's had a massive impact on alcohol policy in Scotland, and is now extending that to the European region and beyond, as indeed that had been a facet of his career in Scotland. And I think, you know, it says a lot about how Scottish advocacy is regarded kind of internationally, that, you know, Eric's had a massive contribution to that. So great to be here to mark this and to be part of this celebration. Thank you, Eric, for being a great colleague and friend.
Thanks very much, Alison. Put you in the spot there slightly. That's fantastic. Charlie Steele from the Scottish Discovery Consortium. Welcome. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Alistair. Excuse me. I'd like to follow on a wee bit with what Jarden had said about the document, the impact that document has had. It's been really quite phenomenal. As someone who's worked in various ways across the issues of alcohol for a lot of years, we've seldom had professionals who are champions, especially of the people who are anonymous by nature of their involvement. And it's been an absolute joy to watch Eric Carlin step up and engage and take part in expressing the need that there is for lived experience and the buzzword these days, the recovery capital that's inherent within that cohort. And I remember one night, just very briefly, first time I met Eric, my friend Terry and I, and we went to a place just round from the Royal College. Had some coffee, and I was really intrigued by, first of all, his energy, his insight and his passion, but especially the fact that he recognised that people like myself who have lived experience had a voice, and he's used that voice to a wonderful extent. I'm really pleased to be here today. It's nice to see some faces I haven't seen for many years. Thank you, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Charlie, for adding your thanks there. And I see that there's many nice comments in the chat, and also just to draw your attention to the fact that Chris has put the two papers that we've discussed, the alcohol-related liver disease guidance and the Stand Up and Tell Your Story, the links to both of those documents if anybody wants to download those and read them later if they haven't already done so. I'll maybe take the opportunity of using Chairman's prerogative to ask a question here of John Dillon. John, being the first speaker, spoken about alcohol-related liver disease. I think John can guess what I'm going to ask, is that John's always very keen not to have documents which sit and gather dust on the shelf. What's the next steps for this document, and how we engage our fellow liver colleagues and others who are involved in looking after people with alcohol-related liver disease?
Colleagues who identify themselves.
You're very quiet, John.
Sorry, I'll put my. I'll start directing airline traffic again by bringing the microphone closer to my lips. I think it's less to do with people who have an interest in liver disease, this document. It's about the wider community and raising awareness, and what is, for many people, a complicated process. It's a bit like reading the tea leaves in the bottom of a cup, whether someone's got liver damage or not, and understanding what we're, as specialists in the area, most focused and interested on. It's making it simple, and this document makes it simple, and Eric helped ensure that happened. But it's how we then move that out into the wider community, and that has to be an ongoing process of education and awareness raising and trying to minimize the harm and damage that alcohol does in society, which we've done at population level, and this is an opportunity to start doing that at a case finding level and moving that to the next level and starting to personalize the approaches. And so it's giving the confidence to people who are running other alcohol related services as to what they should be advising people to do when it comes to those moments about how do I know how much damage it's done. And it's that we have the document written, it's now getting it out there and using it. It's about awareness raising and how we do that most effectively.
Yes, I'd certainly echo that in terms of awareness raising. And I suppose that one of the things that I've learned as a doctor who's got involved in this field is that it's wrong, in my view, to regard it as two different camps. You know, I think there's a spectrum from population harm to encouraging people who are drinking a bit more to drinking a bit less, to picking up early disease, to then treating folk who perhaps have full-blown addiction or full-blown organ damage, such as damage to the liver. And so I personally am pleased that there are some clinicians involved in this kind of a process, and hope that more will do so. It's not an all or nothing phenomenon.
Yes, it's very much a spectrum, and it's having lots of points of contact that we can protect people along the whole spectrum that they can be affected by. Thanks very much.
Indeed. And I think that if nobody, I'm getting just give me a second to get a message from Chris here. That's fine. I think that if there's no further pressing questions, we could just move ahead with the next part of the programme. We're a few minutes ahead of time, but only 5 or so. So the first talk of the second session, if you like, or part 2, is from Richard Purvis, a name I didn't know until I got involved with SHAAP within the past year or two in terms of my more deep involvement, but everywhere I look he pops up. He's doing a lot of good work. He's a research fellow at the Institute for Social Marketing and Health at the University of Stirling, one of our close working partners at SHAAP, and particularly doing excellent work in various fields of sports marketing and sponsorship. And Richard's going to give the first 2 presentations on this talk, which is close to SHAAP and Eric's heart. So Richard, I'd invite you to speak now.
Thank you, Alistair. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here and to see so many people. It's a really great turnout. Eric was instrumental in SHAAP co-funding 2 research projects, which specifically looked at alcohol marketing during sporting events. And this story began back in 2015, I think. And the team at Institute for Social Marketing and Health had an idea to investigate the alcohol marketing at the upcoming Euro 2016 football tournament. And we felt this was important as France, which was the host country of that tournament, has comprehensive restrictions on alcohol marketing. Some of you might be familiar with Loire Van. It includes an outright ban on the alcohol sponsorship of sporting events. So Carlsberg were continuing to be one of the key sponsors of this event. So it provided a key opportunity for us to examine the alcohol industry's response to Loire Van. And we brought this idea to the attention of Eric, and he recognised the importance of the project. And he mentioned that SHAAP, alongside the Institute of Alcohol Studies, may be interested in funding the project. And Eric was incredibly supportive in developing the research proposal and in securing the funding, so we went ahead with the project. And the study examined alcohol marketing references during Euro 2016 through broadcasts in the UK, France, and Republic of Ireland. And we chose these countries as the tournament provides an opportunity to explore whether the volume and type of marketing differed in broadcasts across 3 different countries. And for this project, we sampled 18 matches from each stage of the tournament. Now, you might think it was a lot of fun to watch football matches, and I'm a football fan, but sampling 18 matches and going through them in meticulous detail took a bit of the fun out of it. But we developed a customized tool to identify and categorize all the alcohol marketing references that appeared. So, for example, the location of the reference, the duration of the reference was on screen for, and the brand it featured. And a reference was defined as any reference to an alcohol brand that lasted a second or more, and included things like electronic static pitch-side advertising, branded merchandise, television advertisements, sponsorship lead-ins, branded packaging, all those things. And we found that on average, there were more than 100 alcohol marketing references per broadcast in each country. And most of these references appeared during the match, where the footage was found to be the same in all the 3 countries we looked at. And the most popular location and format was electronic pitch-side advertising. Now, importantly, we found that almost all the marketing references were what is known as alibi marketing, which is the practice of using features that are synonymous with a brand, but without making an explicit reference to the brand name itself. So, for example, during Euro 2016, the lead sponsor, Carlsberg, only used their slogan, "Probably the best in the world," on the advertising hoardings around the pitch. But the text was presented in the same font, the same colours that they used for their main brand name. And we concluded that although the overall proportion of direct brand references, so featuring the brand name, was low, the high proportion of what we called indirect brand references demonstrates that alcohol producers were able to circumvent Loire Van using alibi marketing. And the limited differences that we found between the 3 countries highlights the importance of, say, a host nation's regulations for international tournaments. And this is something Eric was very, very keen to look at. And he was also keen to stress that regulations to limit alcohol advertising need to be rigorously enforced and monitored. And there needs to be clear lines of accountability explicitly outlined in law. The resulting report, I've seen other people pick up reports, so I'll pick up one as well. Oh, I've blurred my screen. It needs to be close to my face. There we go, file play, that's it. It gained really good media coverage in the UK and also in France, where the NGO who monitored the Loire Van, ANPA, so ANPA, challenged Carlsberg's sponsorship activities during the tournament. And the findings were first presented at the European Alcohol Policy Conference in Slovenia, where Eric and I would like to say, bonded over a shared love of the Eurovision Song Contest. That was quite a night. I'll always remember it. And following on from this, during one of our final meetings for the Foul Play project, we discussed the volume of alcohol marketing in other sports, and that included rugby union. And we also discussed the impending restrictions due to be implemented in Ireland's alcohol bill. And Eric again recognised this would make a really interesting research project. And he mentioned that SHAAP, alongside the Institute of Alcohol Studies, may be interested in funding the work alongside Alcohol Action Ireland as well. So this led to our most recent piece of research, alcohol marketing during the 2020 Six Nations Championship, where we utilised the same coding framework we developed during the Euro 2016 project and applied it to the alcohol marketing visible in UK broadcasts of the Six Nations Championship matches. And these matches were played in the UK, France and Ireland in a similar way that we looked at the Euro 2016 matches. But we wanted to look at the frequency and nature of alcohol marketing during the tournament, how Ireland's impending restrictions may influence alcohol marketing practice, and to what extent France's Ivan law impacts on the frequency and nature of marketing during the tournament. And for this, we learned our lesson from the Euros. We only looked at 4 matches for this, but I can tell you that was more than enough. We looked at 2 matches played in Ireland, 1 played in Scotland and 1 played in France. And we found that alcohol marketing was most frequent in the match played in the UK. And you'll realise when I say there was 961 references in the match, why we limited the sample. This was followed by 2 matches played in Ireland, which had 754 and 690 references each. And then the match played in France had 193 references. And in all 4 broadcasts and in all 3 countries, references were mostly observed during the match in high-profile locations, including large static logos in the middle of the pitch, logos on the match equipment, for example, the ball, the goalposts. In Ireland and Scotland, almost all these references were explicit branding, whereas most references in France, again, used alibi marketing. So, for example, the phrase greatness as opposed to the brand name Guinness, albeit using similar fonts and colour. And in all 4 broadcasts, no references contained age restriction warnings, and only a minority had clearly visible responsible drinking messages, which they were supposed to have. So this data had mixed implications for Ireland's new restrictions in advertising, which just came in on Friday there, I think. On the one hand, the data shows that the new controls prohibit some of the most frequently used marketing activities, for example, that highly visible static logo on the pitch, but it also shows that alcohol marketing already appears in a variety of other locations that won't be restricted by the new controls. And we also found again that alcohol sponsorship was evident in France through Alibi Marketing. So questions remain over the monitoring and enforcement of the French law, and that has implications for the context in Ireland and any consideration of controls in either the UK or elsewhere. Again, this report earned widespread media coverage in Scotland, England and Ireland. It was recently raised and answered as a question in the Scottish Parliament. And without Eric's contribution, neither of these projects would have got off the ground. And this important evidence regarding the circumvention of the Waravan and just the extent of alcohol advertising visible during major sporting events would be lacking. And I'd just like to finish by thanking Eric on behalf of everyone involved in these research projects for his foresight and his willingness to fund what we believe is extremely important research. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard. That's great, and I think that these studies really have captured not just interested parties here's imagination, but the wider public. The Foul Play paper and more recently the Six Nations work has really attracted a lot of press interest, and I think that the cover of Foul Play with that picture of the Carlsberg that probably is a very striking cover. And again, Chris has put the both those pieces of work, the links to them on the chat for those that want to explore them further. Continuing the sports theme, I think the Scottish Women's Football Federation are unique, I think, amongst sporting bodies in that they have promised or stated that they won't accept sponsorship from gambling, alcohol or tobacco companies. And I think that's a wonderful stance for sporting, particularly with youth sporting and young women. And I was delighted when SHAAP, under the guidance of Eric and with the encouragement of Peter Rice, a great football fan himself, took the very innovative step for an organisation like ourselves to provide some sponsorship to the Scottish Women's Football Federation. And that sponsorship continues to this day. And indeed, Eleanor, who succeeded Eric as the director of SHAAP and myself have a meeting tomorrow, a photo opportunity with Marie Todd, the Public Health Minister, at a Hearts training ground, Oriam, with the Hearts junior team to reinforce this link and this sponsorship. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Vivian McLaren, who is the chair of the Scottish Women's Football Federation, to talk about this aspect of SHAAP's work. Welcome, Vivian.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to celebrate such a wonderful man as Eric is. I think, we made a kind of stance in 2016 where we decided as a board that we wanted to create football, women's and girls football in Scotland as a clean sport, because as we know, and Richard particularly well aware, alcohol sponsorship is absolutely everywhere, especially in football, as is gambling as well. And I think that we have over 9,000 registered players with us, and we cover all of the domestic games, so from your under 9s up into your elite levels, such as the Scottish Women's Premier League, where now we have a couple of, probably about 3 full-time teams there. And we just felt that creating role models is extremely important, because we want young girls to be able to, who want to play football. One, we want them to be able to do that quite easily, and 2, we want them to do that and actually aspire to maybe achieving, maybe playing for the national team, or playing for one of the top clubs. And we want to also give those girls the opportunity that actually, if they want to do that as a full-time job in Scotland, they can. And since I've been in the board, which is about 7 years now, we've seen that transition begin to happen. Little girls can actually have a career in football now in Scotland, which is wonderful. We don't get any public funding at all, because we are classified as an ANA, which is an affiliated national association. So we get a small contribution from the Scottish FA every year, and we rely heavily on commercial income. Now, we've been approached several times by alcohol brands over the years wanting to put money into the game, but with probably over 80% of our members being under 18, we just felt we have to be a responsible organisation. We need to encourage girls and women, to look at not only being, the best that they can be, and whether that's elite football, great, whether that's recreational football with your friends, that's absolutely fine, but, physically healthy and mentally healthy, and the well-being aspect of it is vitally important. And thanks to us taking that stance, we got a bit of flack. I will not name clubs that gave us a bit of flack for that, but Eric, reached out just to talk about it a bit further, about some research that he was doing. And, therein began a kind of a wonderful relationship. And in 2019, SHAAP became one of our first ever youth sponsors of the game. And that's looking at the elite end of the youth game, which is under 15s and under 19s. And it's just hugely important for us. It's hugely important from a messaging perspective. As I said earlier, we've got wee boys and wee girls, and it's some of the wee boys' favourite players play for our Scottish women's team, because they are not in that position where, oh, that's a girl. So it's all about the role models. It's all about us trying to educate our members on how to lead a healthy lifestyle. And, we have been, queried as to, why are you turning down? The amount of times I've been on radio or been asked about it in media, why are you turning down money into the game? We want long-term partnerships that will benefit the game. We do not want short-term injections of cash, although that's very useful. And so SHAAP has been just a perfect partnership for us. And I can't make the press call tomorrow because I'm afraid I'm down in Nottingham for the week. But it's hugely important to us. And as the game's beginning to grow, I think our registered players are up 40% over the past 3 years. We signed our first broadcast deal in 2016, where, most of the Women's Premier League games are either on BBC Alibi or they are on BBC Scotland Online. We have a highlight show on BBC Scotland on a Monday night, which again was a dream that I had probably 4 or 5 years ago. So we can really see the traction that the game is beginning to kind of take, and the direction. And SHAAP have just been an absolute wonderful partner. I will really miss Eric obviously seeing as much as we probably used to, but absolutely over the moon that we've got new people there who are just as invested in what we're trying to do. And we'll continue to get flack. You know, there aren't many organisations out there apart from gambling and alcohol that can afford to invest in sport. But I think our job in creating women and girls football in Scotland as a clean sport is very much at the centre of everything that we do. You know, as the game grows, we do get questioned more and more about this. Are you sure that's the stance you're taking? Because we've got an alcohol brand that wants to sponsor us in some of the clubs, and it's just not something that we support. And I think that whole well-being aspect, I've been lucky enough to be invited by Eric to speak at a couple of conferences with him, and it's the well-being aspect, the role model aspect for wee girls growing up in this country, that not only can they aspire to be a footballer if they want to, but they can also take a step to think about actually what have I kind of learned here? You know, what have my clubs helped me to understand in terms of being physically focused, and also in terms of emotionally, and also in terms of lifestyle and well-being aspect. And some of the research that Eric and his guys did do, you know, showed that the attitudes that girls had, you know, they you know, teenage girls actually are not interested in drinking because they aspire to being in the first team. They aspire to being playing the Women's Premier League on a Sunday, and that's huge for us. And I think, you know, we'll still get asked about it, and we will still have to probably protect the position. But for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. And you know, the fact that we're able to renew this relationship with SHAAP is absolutely wonderful, and we're just delighted with the partnership and delighted with the enthusiasm that Peter and Eric have put into us, because just a wonderful partner. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually chat a bit about it. And Eric, best of luck at everything that you do, and we will catch up soon.
Thanks very much, Vivian. That's great to hear it. Hear it exactly as it's happening with the young girls. And you know, just adding my own tuppence worth, I couldn't agree more about the role model aspect, and the it's all about providing healthy options rather than just saying don't do this and don't do that. Some of you will be familiar with the so-called Icelandic model of just how they have turned around their problem with drugs and alcohol in young people by some restrictive measures in terms of curfew and raising drinking age limits and stuff, but also by really investing in facilities for young people. And it'd be nice to think that in some future time, the pressure on you, if you like, might be less if we could get legislation through on this topic.
That would be wonderful. And there's a lot of evidence to back it up. You know,
sure.
Richard and various other people, yeah.
For sure. Well, it'll be part of our chat with Marie Todd tomorrow, don't you worry. Great. Well, thanks for that. Moving on now. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a special Scottish Alcohol Research Network event, and I'm delighted that one of the co-chairs of SARN, that's Carol Emsley, is going to speak next. Carol, as most of you will know, I think, leads up the Substance Use Research Group at Glasgow Caledonian University. And I've come to realise in my short time at SHAAP just how crucial links, such as links with Stirling and the links with units at Glasgow Caledonian, are to our work, and bridging that gap between advocacy and research. And so, Carol, I'd like you to say words.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. I've got lots of bells ringing here around keywords like energy, fun, inspiration, innovation, and making the impossible possible. These are all things that Eric does. I couldn't resist sharing a few pictures with you. Thank you. So in 2014, Eric commissioned us at Glasgow Caledonian University to work on the first qualitative research study looking at the social context of LGBT people's drinking in Scotland. So we knew that drinking and alcohol-related harm were high in this community, but we didn't have detailed understandings of why, and we didn't have knowledge of what was going on in Scotland. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues, Dr. Lana Ireland, and particularly Gemma Lennox, who facilitated some fantastic focus groups with LGBTQ friendship groups for this research. So what did we find? Well, our research really highlighted the centrality of drinking on the commercial gay scene, the lack of alcohol-free spaces for LGBTQ plus people in Scottish society, which still exists today, and strong peer pressure to drink across the life course. It also highlighted a range of barriers, including service providers assuming that all patients were heterosexual and cisgender, and perceptions by our respondents that alcohol services and peer support groups would not provide safe spaces, so the idea that they would be macho and intimidating. And the research also flagged up the ways in which LGBT plus people demonstrated their identity through alcohol. And one of the many fantastic things about Eric is, of course, he knows everyone. And as Alistair said, it's so important to join up our research to the people who will use it and who will find it useful in order to make our research useful. And so Eric facilitated our beautiful report, which is such a joy when you're an academic and work in black and white to have a beautiful, colourful, accessible report. He facilitated us presenting our research at the Scottish Parliament, working with MSPs, working with the Scottish Trans Alliance and LGBT plus health, and getting our research to third sector organisations, to policymakers and to the people that would use it. Then I've also spotted David Barber here today, and I'm really pleased that our research has been used with a lot of other research as part of the Kinder, Stronger, Better community campaign. And I really would ask colleagues to take a look at this really useful resource and short videos co-produced with community volunteers. So David Barber at the Glasgow Council on Alcohol and Ash Husband, formerly Scottish Families Affected by Alcohol and Drugs, during our research worked with LGBT plus community volunteers to develop this campaign to really flag up and raise awareness of substance use in the LGBT plus community, and to signpost people to help and advice, which is really key here. And I've got the logo here as well of the Glasgow LGBTQI Substance Use Partnership, also set up to address this disproportionate impact of substance use on LGBTQI plus people by improving service inclusivity and proactively engaging with the community. So again, getting the research where it needs to go. I also really want to highlight Eric's substantial academic contribution. I met him, first of all, at a speed networking event at the launch of the British Sociological Association Alcohol Study Group, and he later supported an event for this group where we had people from different disciplines talking about their alcohol research, talking about working together, and talking about future directions. And as always, I was impressed by his energy, his huge experience, his ambitious vision for SHAAP, and his commitment to actually making things happen, which is absolutely music to my ears. I think we can really see Eric's commitment to inequalities as well through his PhD on social justice, alcohol and youth transitions, his work with SHAAP on women in alcohol seminar series with the Institute of Alcohol Studies, and followed by work on men in alcohol, the LGBT work and trans inclusion in alcohol services. And his work aligns so well with us at Glasgow Caledonian University, the University for the Common Good. And we're really proud to have Eric as an honorary fellow at the university. So Eric Carlin, sociologist, knowledge broker, policy influencer, now policy maker, and all-round fabulous human being. Thank you, and thank you for helping us transform evidence into action.
That's a great strap. That's a great strap line, Carol. Transforming evidence to action. I must use that more often.
Well, that's Eric's. I stole it from him.
Excellent. I should have guessed. That's great. And apologies for forgetting to introduce the topic. You managed to introduce it yourself. Thanks very much. It does very much highlight how under Eric's direction they've been able to, I think, both have a broad brush, but also focus in on specific questions, such as the LGBTQ plus a problem, the problem for women, and the problems for men too. So I think that's been, again, a very hopeful, very helpful focus for people to understand the threads of the alcohol problem. You've heard the name Peter Rice mentioned just once or twice already today. Eric and Ernie, no, it's Eric and Peter. Peter Rice has been the chair of SHAAP for a long time, until just less than a year ago. And over that time, he and Eric have worked together in every aspect of the work, perhaps specifically most particularly the MUP work, but every aspect of SHAAP's work. Then, just as Peter was coming towards the end of his tenure, when he perhaps thought he could put his feet up a little bit, along came COVID. And suddenly there was a whole lot more work to be done. And SHAAP found itself at the forefront of having to very quickly respond to a changed environment for people at risk and trying to help them in this new situation. And Peter's going to say a little bit about that as an introduction to his work with Eric. Peter, you're very welcome.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Alistair, and just great to see so many pals on the call. Not a surprise, you know, I'm confident that people would turn out for Eric, but it's terrific to see so many people. But yeah, I mean, we had done a few things, some of which you had heard about, but and Eric's quite good at looking ahead and anticipating what's going to happen, but he didn't anticipate the global pandemic. But we, you know, needed to show some nifty footwork. So from that kind of starting off as a bit of a nuisance, meaning that we couldn't go to a meeting in Dublin, it then emerged this is actually something much more substantial and much more significant. So really in you know, from the middle of February through to the middle of March, it became clear what an impact the COVID-19 pandemic was going to have on alcohol services. Alcohol services are a very people-orientated business. You might do a bit of prescribing here and there, but it's essentially a human interaction business, and the pandemic, just by its very nature, interfered with that. So we very quickly pulled together some guidance, and Eric was the main author of this, on what are the practical measures, social distancing and so on, that services need to put in place to safely operate. And that was probably done within a week. And we then put that out. But it then became evident that in fact there was a bigger problem, that the services in fact were just not there. And if they were there, they were being closed down for a number of reasons. Alcohol services seemed to be particularly at risk of being closed down. Some of that couldn't be avoided. You know, spaces were needed for other roles in hospitals and so on and so forth. But it became clear that a lot of the services we were writing guidance for, in fact, were just not going to be there. And so that really meant that we had to shift our focus to writing guidance not for workers, but for people themselves. And that was partly driven by a flurry of, you know, guidance and information and things that were being said, particularly on social media. And some of that guidance was frankly not very good. In particular, the guidance to don't do anything about your drinking. If you're a heavy drinker, just stay put. Services will be back soon, and just keep going the way you are. Now, from the work that we'd done on mortality, a report that had come out a year before, we knew that actually achieving cruising altitude was a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do. We'd found that 1 in 6 people who, you know, had attended the Royal Infirmary with alcohol withdrawals were dead within a year. So this idea that people could, you know, safely stay where they were until help arrived was just not realistic. So in discussions with Eric said typically, well, we need to crack on and do something about that. So we got busy, and along with Eric and my friend and colleague Shona Anderson, who's still in clinical practice, which she kept reminding me of, that I'd been out of that for a while, we really got to knuckled down and just wrote some guidance that we hoped would be helpful for people who knew they were drinking more than was good for them, who were a bit worried about making changes, and just trying to put in place some structure and help for people to deal with that. Now, some of this was quite tricky to write. There's a guidance going to come out on alcohol, how to help with alcohol problems from Public Health England for the 4 nations come out shortly, and that'll be hundreds of pages. So trying to kind of boil things down to something that's easily understandable and digestible is difficult, because sometimes you need to make decisions, and services aren't perfect. And I think that was Eric's real contribution to this work, was to say, this isn't going to be perfect. We can't cover every eventuality. Sometimes we need to go in to cut through what the guidance is on what the perfect service should look like, because the perfect service isn't there. So some institutions I know really got lost in the weeds on this and ended up doing nothing because it was just too complicated. And I think Eric's attitude of we need to do the best we can. We need to do something useful here. We might be prone to some criticism here, but it's important and we need to get on and do it. And so that's what we did in drafting out our guidance. And Michaela will talk a little bit about the Scottish Recovery Consortium's involvement with finalising that. But it's a really satisfying thing to work on. There was a reference in a leader in the British Medical Journal within a month of the guidance going out. I reviewed a paper from India about 6 weeks after the guidance had gone out that referred to this guidance that had come from Scotland, and I don't think I'd ever been involved in anything that had such a quick impact. And I think it's ended up being the most downloaded thing that we've ever done actually in SHAAP. And I like the thought that probably the most downloaded thing that we've done was advice to the public, was advice to people. Actually, not advice so much to professionals, although we have heard from services that have found that it's been useful for them to use as well. But one of the great things about it was working with the Scottish Recovery Consortium, and over to my pal Michaela Jones, who's going to talk about SRC's work in this publication.
Great, thanks, Eric. As you say, we next up, and the last of our formal speakers, although I've got several other people I'd like to call on informally as we go through the discussion. But the last of our formal speakers is indeed Michaela Jones, who is part of the Scottish Recovery Consortium. She's one of their lived experience officers, and you may know that she's the force behind the Into Recovery Daily News, which is a very useful collection of news and views in relation to addiction and recovery. But Michaela, we're very interested to hear what you have to say about this. Thanks.
First of all, I do apologise for the dogs barking in the background. For some reason, they the minute I go on Zoom, they decide that there's something interesting in the garden. So first of all, I will obviously talk about the alcohol guidelines, but I want to also talk a little bit about Eric, who I am privileged, I guess, to call a friend as well as a colleague. We actually met way back near the beginning of my recovery journey when I ran a website called Wired Into Recovery, which some of you may know. And I came across Eric because he'd made a stand against the ACMD banning methadone, that they hadn't been given time to study the papers. That's when Eric worked for Mental UK. And that sort of struck me as Eric is a person who, no matter how tough it gets, he does stick to his principles, and that's something I really, really admired. And Eric might not think this, but he's actually been an integral part of my recovery journey, largely because, as anybody out there with lived experience knows, it can be a real struggle for your voice to be heard. The door is more likely to be closed than it is to be open, and you often, and although it has improved greatly, you're often made to feel sort of lesser when you interact with professionals, although I would regard myself as a professional with lived experience. And I can say for a fact, actually, that Eric never, ever made me feel lesser. In fact, he made me really value the things that I learned along the way, and helped me to see the value of them. So Eric, I really, really thank you for that. And I also think it's quite interesting that I've always found my work in this sector, it's still quite a male-dominated society. There's not that many women's voices, and I think Eric's done a real power of good to get women's voices out there. Women suffer from alcohol too, and so much of the advice and guidance and things are predicated on the idea that it's white middle-class males. And in fact, as Carol said, not everybody is a straight white male. Bringing that into the conversation. And we often suffer much more because we're not a straight white male and some of the information isn't written for us. So, I think those are massive things. I think first of all, just to have a voice on writing guidelines for the public was an amazing step forward. It does seem crazy that if you are writing to the public that you don't have the voices of lived experience, you are the public inputting into that. And I think from Dying for a Drink, Stand Up and Tell Me Your Story, and the guidelines that are produced, having the voice of lived experience has given it that extra little edge that allows us to speak directly to the public in perhaps the way we haven't spoken before. I think the guidelines also recognise that perhaps the people who best know what to do about their alcohol problems are the people who have those alcohol problems themselves, that people do need advice and support to do it, but they're experts in their own condition. And to just not encourage, but just to say, carry on as you are, isn't good enough. That any major changes in life, yes, even the horrible pandemic, does present people an opportunity to change and to look at themselves. And people need the support to do that. And I think the guidelines really, really, really help with that. And I think, Peter's saying how much have been downloaded. It's not wrong to you're not necessarily putting people at risk by putting tools in their hands to enable them to understand and identify a path forward towards their own recovery, whatever that may be. I think it's quite interesting as well that the guidelines actually included references to recovery communities and mutual aid, because while frontline services shut down, in fact, the recovery community came into its own in the rooms. Obviously, a big fellowship site was up and running, but also recovery communities across Scotland made the transition to online support much, much quicker than any frontline services. And we are constantly hearing stories of people who found recovery in COVID-19 and found recovery via Zoom. So for me, those guidelines are not just about guidelines. They're a clarion call to say, let us not lack ambition in this sector. Let us trust that if we work together and allow everybody to have the information they need, then perhaps we start making those small steps to changing things. And it is, there are risks inherent in encouraging people to change their lives, but surely that's what we're all about. So it was really great to work with SHAAP, and I hope we'll continue to work with SHAAP. And it's been really, really positive to work with Eric. And I suppose the only message I've got is more please, more collaboration, more working together, more engaging everybody in this big conversation around alcohol, which will no doubt continue for years and years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michaela. I think it's entirely appropriate that the last official word from the speakers should indeed come from somebody in the recovery community. Thank you very much for providing that. In a moment, you'll be pleased to hear, the moment you're probably waiting for, we'll give Eric a chance to answer all these accusations. But before we do that, I'd just like to take a moment to say how nice it is to have not just the current SHAAP team, Eleanor and Chris and all my steering group colleagues, but also the former SHAAP people here. It's lovely to see Felicity Garvey, and it's lovely to see Jackie McDermott, and also Elaine Tate. I think Elaine, in the work that she did as the CEO of the Royal College in Edinburgh, can consider herself an honorary SHAAP person. And our many partners who have not had a chance to speak yet, look forward to doing that in the discussion. But now, the moment you've been waiting for, the floor is yours, Eric.
Oh dear. I didn't recognise myself in almost all of that. I hadn't prepared anything to say because I wasn't really sure what we were doing. I just want to say how
We weren't going to warn you.
Yeah. I want to say how greatly appreciative I am. Honestly, it's short. Apart from my husband agreeing to marry me, I think this is the nicest thing that anybody's ever done for me. So thank you very, very much indeed. What really thrilled me when I thought that you were organising this is that you were organising something to talk about the work, and genuinely that we know each other really well, because that's actually what it's all about. The people who did, not whoever, because some of you are here, the people who came up with the idea of SHAAP were genuinely inspired, you know, that we actually took the passion and outrage of the medical professions and conveyed it into something useful that can be communicated into policy, drawing on research and bringing all that into action, the evidence into action thing. I love that, Carol. I'm not sure if I came up with that, but I'll take the credit for it. But all of that kind of coming together, the founders of SHAAP should be rightly pleased with themselves, and SHAAP is still seen and increasingly seen as a really important influence on international alcohol policies, not just in the UK or in Scotland. I do want to say, honestly, I feel embarrassed that none of this was down to me. It's actually all of these achievements. Peter Rice and I have actually been hand in hand, partners, sparring partners sometimes. It's been brilliant, Peter. You were my mentor. I learned so much from you. I came in, I don't know if you remember, I came in saying, I don't believe in minimum unit price. I think it disadvantages people. And you helped me kind of realise, correctly, I realised that I had misunderstood some of the evidence for that, and I'm really grateful to you for providing me with those opportunities. The recovery community has been incredibly important to me, and I want to thank all of the speakers who have come here today. Donald coming from the government, everyone, my recovery friends, everyone. I'm sorry if I miss anybody out. I really don't mean to. You're all there. I think just. None of this is done by one person or two people, and the strength, I think, of SHAAP going forward is that, you know, it's revitalising. It's Eleanor, Chris, Alistair. It's fantastic to hear about all the things that you're doing. I look at your news items, and I think they're much better than we did. And that's great. That's fantastic that they're better than what we were doing before. Felicity, that isn't to say you weren't doing great things before, but I realise she's on there. But I want to say thanks to Felicity as well. Felicity, it was so much fun with you. It was so much fun with Jackie as well. But really bringing the evidence into action, I think, so that we've actually got evidence-based policies, what it's all been really about. And one of the things that I was really pleased about as I was leaving was it not just down to me, but down to Lindsay Patterson, who kind of took over on the interim period when I first went to WHO, and I really want to appreciate Lindsay here as well, was that we actually managed to secure SARN. SARN has been kind of for a long time kind of, you know, relying on the goodwill of a number of people, but actually now it's got some funding. The Scottish Government has committed to that. For me, that's just another example of civil servants with ambition and vision coming alongside the NGOs, exactly in the way that Donald Henderson described it. I'm really sorry if I've missed anybody. I just want to say thank you so much. It's the nicest thing, and the work is what's important. We should be outraged by the fact that we have so many people, 1 million people in the WHO European region dying every year directly because of alcohol, but we should also be aspirational for people to have the lives, the recovery that people like Jarden and Michaela were talking about. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Eric. A round of applause for that. Thank you. Now, I'm told that all SARN events are officially 90 minutes. So officially, our 90 minutes are up, but you don't have to leave the second unless you have a train to catch. That's unlikely, but so I'm going to open the discussion up for anybody who'd like to either say something or ask a question. I have got a question from Dr. Kapoor. I think you wish to ask a question.
Hello to everyone. And I want to tell only one thing. The session was very, very successfully handled by you all the seniors, and it will be very useful for all the people. So thank you so much. Just I want to say this thing only. Thank you so much.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm from India.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. It shows the reach of SHAAP and of Dr. Carlin. Thank you very much for joining us. I've just been told that it is in fact Justina who's having problems with her audio. So while we're trying to sort that out, I'll give the floor to Eleanor Jane, who succeeded Eric as the director of SHAAP earlier this year.
I just wanted to say what an amazing legacy I have inherited, and will try not to mess up, but obviously I'm now feeling quite a lot of pressure after this webinar. But in terms of your legacy, Eric, I think what you've done in terms of shaping policy, taking your research from the very sort of early ideas, supporting research projects in various different ways and then seeing them through, is incredible. And and for instance, I'm thinking of one in particular now around that was covered earlier in the speeches about the sponsorship of sports by alcohol companies. Obviously, you've been working on this and shaping this agenda for years, and I'm now inheriting this and taking it forward, I hope, with Scottish Parliament and Scottish Government. So it's not as if now you're gone, this is all out of the way. This is still really current and something that we'll be working on over months, if not years to come. But also what I've inherited is a really positive welcome into this whole sort of community around alcohol and public health. And I think that's largely down to you, Eric, and obviously the relationships that we all are aware that you've built up with this huge network in Scotland, UK and beyond. So I just want to say a massive thank you. And also I'm really now very scared, so thanks.
Thanks very much, Eleanor. Just you mentioned their interactions with the Scottish Government. It was very nice to see some Scottish Government officials here. I think Joe Fitzpatrick was here earlier on, and I think Richard Simpson was, I'm not sure if he's still here, but he was certainly here at one point too. So I think that's a reflection of the standing in which you're held, Eric. Felicity and then Florence.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for organising this meeting this afternoon, and it's really great to see everybody who's been part of the many teams that SHAAP got together over the past few years. So I was very lucky to have the last 3 years before retirement working as policy officer in SHAAP with Eric and also Jackie. I have to say, I knew nothing about alcohol policy when I started the job. So I suppose I should probably thank Peter and Eric for even employing me. But it was a fantastic time, and we did so many exciting things in those 3 years from 2017 to 2020. So the MAP was actually introduced. We had the sponsorship of Scottish women's football, which is so exciting. And the organisation sort of pivoted towards recovery support and being much more in touch with people like Jardin and Michaela, who brought their lived experience to the benefit of everybody. But really, I think looking back on it, it was a total enrichment of my life, because we met so many different communities. I won't name them all, but most of them are here anyway, and it's great to see everybody and be reminded of that time. But finally, yeah, so Eric was my line manager, and I can confirm everything that everybody said in terms of his humanity, his compassion, his humour, his fairness, his concern about inequalities. And we're still in touch, and we're good friends. And one of my favourite memories is with Jackie as well, who's also here. The three of us sitting in the office on the rare occasions when Edinburgh wasn't travelling to some international conference and spreading the good news and the message and everything. We had some fantastic discussions, political discussions, and I probably learned as much through them as I did through the actual work. So thank you, Eric, again. It's been a real privilege working with you. Yeah, great to see you here this afternoon.
Thanks, Felicity. With a lot of hands up now, and we'll try and take as many as we can. Florence, delighted you're here. I think I'm right in saying that you succeeded Marianne as Secretary General of Eurocare. So Florence Bertoletti.
Thank you so much. Indeed. Eleanor, you're not the only one who's got big shoes to fill. It was great to hear Marianne, and I understand what that means. But what I wanted to say is, in my new position, I discovered the wonderful Eric, who is still working on alcohol-related harm, and is a great ally to us all at the WHO. So that's how I've met Eric, and having worked for the past, more than 20 years with WHO officials, well, he is the voice of the WHO with such a bright angle that it makes the work so much easier for all of us, understanding that aspect. So that's what I wanted to highlight, is that Eric is still working with us today, and we look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you very much, Florence. Nice to hear that relationship is going to continue. And of course, we're delighted that Peter has taken over as chair of Eurocare, so the links continue. Dan Gosler, delighted to see you here. Feel free to make a comment. You're muted. There you go.
That's it. I'm so sorry I was late. I was in another meeting and I just couldn't get away before, but I'm so pleased to at least have joined the end of this meeting. And I wanted to say thank you to Eric, because I'm a patient in recovery. I met Eric through Peter Rice, who I was in committee meetings with several years ago. And I remember we met for coffee on Tottenham Court Road, and we introduced to each other. And he's just over the years been a great support to me, and replied to any messages and kept in contact. And it's been good to know you, and I hope we don't lose concepts. And I think it's wonderful to have a celebration of somebody who's done work like this. So thank you, Eric, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Diane. And Justina, I'm pleased you're back with us. We hope you don't sound like King Kong anymore. Have another go. Speak. Okay, no luck. You'll just have to put it in the chat, or phone up Eric afterwards and take him for a drink. Yep. Sorry about that. Anyway, I did want to highlight SFAD, the Scottish Families Against Addiction and Drugs. They really do have a crucial role in this partnership of Scottish organisations. The secondary harm from alcohol, if you like, is something which I think we really need to highlight. So I'm sorry that we can't hear Justina's own words, but we've obviously been watching with great interest the events in Ireland over the last couple of years, and we're delighted that Suzanne Costello is here with us. Costello, correct?
Correct.
Suzanne's with us, and I'm delighted that you can join in.
Thanks very much, Alistair. I just wanted to say that I'm delighted to be part of this today to pay tribute to Eric, but I was working directly in alcohol policy between 2013 and 2018, and that was a time before legislation had come in Ireland or MEP been passed in Scotland. And the intensity of that period of time was just so great. And I started, as I say, relatively naively. And when people in the alcohol industry started being mean to me in public and in private, and I was getting nasty emails and people were calling me names in the newspaper, Eric was just absolutely super, because he kept on saying to me, you're not really succeeding until you're being called names. And that collegiality that he extended to me when I was only starting really put a bit of steel in my spine and gave me courage. And many others, Peters and lots of people on the call, were equally collegiate and supportive. But I think we really forged great bonds between Ireland and Scotland. And I now work on a north-south basis, and the relationship between Northern Ireland and Scotland is a particularly important one. And the friendships forged at that particularly difficult time are still very much in place and incredibly helpful today. And I think the collegiality that Eric always shows is particularly special, but I think it's just a great tribute to him to see so many people on the call today. So we all obviously feel the same way. So delighted he's in WHO and bringing that spirit with him.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. These are interesting thoughts on that time and the relevance to today. Thank you indeed. Elaine Tate. Elaine used to be the CEO of the RCPE, and it's delighted to see you. I haven't seen you for a little while, Elaine.
No, my comments are really about recognising the challenge of interagency working, something that Eric is a master at, with his energy, his tenacity, and his diplomacy. But my abiding memory of him is he would turn up at my door on a Monday morning, and I'd play a little game with myself as to how long it would be before he got me to agree to something, or got me to agree to do something for him, and generally it wasn't very long. But to lower the academic tone very slightly, my abiding memory of Eric is as a very natty dresser. I always felt scruffy alongside him, and he's done it again today. Only Eric could wear a waistcoat to a video conference. So Eric, never change.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm sure we'll all definitely mirror those comments. Richard, delighted that Richard Simpson, who, like myself, is a medic, but also, as you'll be well aware, is an important MSP and has been very much involved in these discussions over the years on alcohol policies in all aspects. So, Richard, delighted that you're here today.
Yes, I had remembered that Eric, like me, was actually very doubtful about MUP, minimum unit pricing, to begin with, for the same reason that I was concerned that the lowest 3 deciles of income would not be, would be seriously affected by it, but would not. It would not affect the higher income groups, and it would adversely affect those who were very modest drinkers. So I'd forgotten that. But like him, I felt that Peter Rice's patience with me in persuading me that MUP was actually going to be very useful has been a blessing over the years, and I wanted to thank Peter for that over the years. I think it is disappointing that we haven't raised the threshold of minimum unit pricing, and I simply do not understand why it actually wasn't indexed in the original bill when it was finally passed. And that's something that certainly, although I'm no longer an MSP, I will continue to fight for and raise in the Parliament, particularly when you see these latest, I think, quite scurrilous articles saying minimum unit pricing is not effective in any way. I think that's, it's been affected by the failure to increase the threshold, but nevertheless, I think that to say it's not effective flies in the face of some of the early evaluative work. And I think the only other thing I would say is that the social responsibility levy, which I wrote into the 2010 Act, has never been enacted by the Scottish Government, which is extremely disappointing. The Sheffield report said that the windfall profits to the industry will be around 100 million per annum, and they've been allowed to get away with that and use it with all sorts of inventive advertising on both social media and, as we've seen in France and in the reports like foul play, by getting around the advertising ban. Something else which was in my private member's bill of 2015, where I had 10 measures and it was peremptorily dismissed by the government, which was very distressing and disappointing, particularly in relation to advertising, where we have a limited power in Scotland, but we haven't used that power yet. So I really wanted to finish by wishing Eleanor Jane good luck. I've worked with Eleanor in other contexts over the years, and I'm sure she'll be an excellent person to take it forward. And she shouldn't doubt her own capacity to follow into Eric's footsteps. So thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thanks very much, Richard. We're delighted that you saw the light. That's great, fantastic. I think that Diane, I think that's probably what they call a legacy hand, isn't it? Or do you have another point you want to make? That's fine. Okay. And I'm very sorry we can't hear from Justina, but we'll just have to make it for another day. I think we've had an excellent afternoon. It's been lovely to hear everybody's comments, and it's actually quite a good, it's not a bad idea to just sit back and reflect on what an organisation has done over a period of time. It certainly is inspiring to Eleanor and I, and as Eleanor said, a bit scary too, to make sure that we can keep up the good work. But I think that it's a great shame that we're not now retiring next door for nibbles and some soft drinks to continue the chat in person, but that wasn't to be. Perhaps another time. But thank you very much to everybody for coming, and hope to see you all again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye now.
And all the best, Eric. You've had a busy day. You're probably still having it.
Thank you very much. That was so lovely. Thank you. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Catch you soon, Eric. All the best.
Bye. Bye.